Good morning, everybody. We're live with the podcast episode here for Monday, April 7th, the NFL draft update, looking at how teams will pick in round number one. I'm going to go through every single team because if you're like me, it's getting the draft season a couple weeks away. You're hearing more about it. Things are getting busy. You kind of want to know, like, how are teams approaching what we're looking at in round one? How are they going to use their first round pick? Lines are starting to go up at sports books. Yesterday, there was a big move with the Cleveland Browns and what they're going to do. And so this episode is going to serve as just a quick refresh, bring everybody up to date, tell you what's going on with each of these teams, how they might act. And we're going to do this for the NFC teams tomorrow. On Wednesday and Thursday, I'm going to go through some of the positional over-unders that have opened up. And then on Friday, I'm going to look at the first round position totals. So that will go through this week. Next week, we'll do another AFC and NFC update. Have some guests coming on as well to give everybody all of the draft prep that you need going into the draft that gets going here in just over 2 weeks. Hope everybody's doing well. It's been a little while since I talked to everybody here on the live streams, here on the podcast as well. So good to be chatting with each and every one of you. If you're watching on YouTube, comment section is wide open for anybody to drop comments as we go. I'll do my best to get through all the questions as they come in as we go through each of the teams. Before we start in the AFC East, I want to mention two things. Number one, free newsletter over at footballbetters.com. It is going out really at least once a week right now, pretty high frequency. Had Kevin Cole from Unexpected Points on the show on Friday. Had a big newsletter breaking down everything that he was getting into. Have had some draft picks already that have gone out in the newsletter covering everything, win totals. There was some pretty in-depth analysis on those, going through each team with some projections. And so if you want more of this content, head over to footballbetters.com for a free subscription. Those emails will come to your inbox. And then Odds Logic as well. The best odds screen at the best price that is available to you. Works on desktop and mobile. And if you want a free trial to see that, you know what, these odds update as quickly as competing products, and you're getting it at a fraction of the price, you can get a free 7-day trial for signing up. www.oddslogic.com. If you use the referral code RAS when you sign up, you will get the free 7-day trial. I think you'll be very impressed by how great of a product it is. We've had a lot of people sign up through the live streams, through the podcast in the last month or two. It's been a lot of positive reviews. You don't get a lot of positivity around sports betting products in general. Odds Logic has got a lot of positive reviews so far from our folks here in the network, but also other shows and other parts of the community as well. So highly recommend. Check out oddslogic.com, desktop and mobile odds, live, great coverage, great selection of sports books, the alerts and injuries, super quick too. I use it a ton. I think you'll really enjoy it. Promo code RAS will get you a free 7-day trial to check it out. Want to say good morning to a few folks here. Adam Orphan in for another one. He's getting ready for Masters Week. He's probably already golfing in Arizona as well, taking maybe a few hours in the great weather part of the year as well. So hopefully you're enjoying everything down your way. Adam, good to see Zach Moss in for another one. Love that we're doing some of these videos in the off season. Plenty more to come. These will be pretty frequent now through the rest of the spring, rest of the summer. So good to have you back as well. Matthew is already asking about Carter and Hunter gone by the 4th pick. Then the Ravens can get the Patriots can get a partner to trade back. Pardon me on that one. Think they might regret not getting themselves the first overall pick. We'll talk about New England in just a second, Matthew, and what it looks like they can be doing. So here we go. As a bit of a refresh and a catch up on everything that is going on in the AFC. We'll go team by team. And again, this is not me with direct insider knowledge of these teams. This is me looking at everything that's posted online, listening to shows, watching the press conferences, just trying to put together the puzzle pieces, try to figure out what we're getting from each of these teams as a bit of a refresh, giving you some a bit of a framework to work off of as we go. We'll start in the AFC East with the Buffalo Bills. And this is actually something that I have already bet. If you are on the free newsletter at footballbetters.com, first pick to be used on a defensive lineman or an edge rusher is how it's classified, to be used on the defensive line. Plus 140 is the price that I sent out on the newsletter. That is currently now plus 115. I think that price is still playable at plus 115. There have been a number of quotes from Brandon Beane, which is just speculating that it's a position of focus. It's an area where they're looking. They've specified the depth in the draft class. And in all of the mocks and breakdowns that I'm looking at the first round, of all the positions and the premiums being put on them. As you get later in the first round, there's still a lot of speculation that there's some depth at the defensive line for guys to be available. Sean McDermott last week at the annual meetings was asked about the defensive line specifically, and he was talking about how seeing what the Eagles did really resonated with him. I think the suspensions that the Bills have had at the position, and those have been announced the last couple of weeks, keeps this a priority, even though they went out and signed 2 guys. So I think this is going to be an area where they really look in the draft. I wouldn't discount cornerback being another area where they look. There have been another couple of comments mentioned, although those were kind of direct setups in the questions that were asked for them specifically. But cornerback was labeled as a position that both Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott were monitoring, was the quote specifically that they used recently. So I do think the Bills go defense. I think defensive line or edge rusher is where they go, and that is something that I have bet. I would not discount the possibility that they're also looking at a cornerback, and that just might be how things fall very late in the first round for who is available. But I do think the Bills are looking defense so far to this point. Miami Dolphins, team number 2 in the AFC East. This is an interesting one because my thought process, especially with the news yesterday that Teron Armstead has retired, is that the Dolphins were really going to be prioritizing looking at the offensive line. At the combine, Mike McDaniel stayed extra time to watch offensive linemen participate in drills. That's pretty unusual for a head coach to do. So I thought that that was kind of an indication of what they were looking at and trying to get right. When I think about last season, so many issues for the offense happened because of the issues up front on the offensive line. And so just hearing that in my mind kind of flagged to me that, hey, they're looking offense, specifically on the offensive line. You have the Armstead news now tying in. No major changes so far this offseason that would rectify the needs that they have up front. And then just through meeting pressers, combine pressers, and beyond, any time that it was brought up, it was really reaffirmed that it was something that the Dolphins were looking at. I would say the only resistance to this was over the weekend. There's a very popular draft coverage show that isn't mainstream media, but it's very well respected here on YouTube. There was a pick given out on one of those shows that was Dolphins to look defensive line. And that price that was given out was plus 340. And that price has actually come in all the way to plus 240. And so those guys have been very good at providing draft coverage. And so that bet over the weekend has kind of shifted things here a little bit for what Miami could be looking at. But for me, really the last 6 weeks of coach and GM and team commentary have all been offensive line centric, and the news over the weekend with Armstead kind of magnified that to me a little bit. New York Jets, I honestly have no idea. They have made it very intentionally quiet all offseason. Aaron Glenn said it was a goal to have a quiet offseason. It was by design. And so anything from Jets media has really not given away much. There's been a lot of speculation that the Jets are going to look at the tight end position. And that's why we are seeing the tight end price at plus 230 really be one of the shorter tight end prices of any team. My hesitation with that is that the exact same thing was said last year with a much better tight end number 1 in the draft that was apparently going to be available for the Jets. That didn't come to fruition. I don't know if it necessarily changes this year. I think this is fully best player available, and I get the feeling that they're probably going to be looking offensive line first before they look tight end, but I have no info here. I have very few quotes to tie back. Any of the tight end questions and quotes that have come up, they have all been prompted and advanced. It's, what do you think of the tight end class? What do you think of the tight end position? There's been really no stance taken whatsoever. And so you do have the new regime in for the Jets that could perhaps be different than what we've seen, but this is just a team that's given nothing away, and they're going out of their way to keep quiet and to keep everything under wraps. And so I just have the Jets right now labeled best player available for their pick early on day number 1. Here is Matthew, the Pats fan, with the question at the start. I really think the Pats, no matter how this shakes down, end up looking offense. I think the news with Travis Hunter yesterday being tied to the Cleveland Browns and just how significant that line movement was maybe takes him out of the equation. Perhaps getting Diggs did already do that, but I do think the Pats end up looking offensive line. That, to me, is very Vrabel-esque in what he's doing and how he's already gone about building this team. I think it makes sense. There were a couple quotes that came generally unprovoked in pressers that said that the draft is going to be a good option for us to look at the left tackle position. There were other prompts that were kind of setting up just general offensive questions, and Vrabel went out of his way to specify that the offensive line and protecting Drake May is a priority. Heard similar from Wolf as well. And so kind of reading between the lines, it seems like offensive line is a spot that they're looking at. If Hunter ends up going to Cleveland, as it's certainly getting momentum that it looks like he will, that makes things a lot easier for New England to decide on what they're going to do. A lot of flexibility here for them, but I think that they're going to be looking at the offensive line. Now, if Carter ends up slipping, that certainly is like a really good fit for Vrabel. And so I don't think you can fully discount that yet. And that's why we're seeing in the market right now, defensive line plus 225. I think after everything that they bolstered in the free agency window on the defensive side, and still the potential that you get Barmore back maybe excludes that option a little bit. And so offensive line seems like that's going to be the position that takes the most momentum here for the Pats between now and the draft in 17 days. Let's get to the AFC North. Start off with the Baltimore Ravens. This is a lot more difficult than last year. If you remember last year, which actually didn't come true because we saw that run on offensive linemen early, there were so many quotes going around from John Harbaugh saying that he wants to look at the offensive line and they're building in the trenches and protection up front is the priority. And then all the offensive linemen went early, and you ended up seeing that price on the offensive line that was like plus 180 at open. I want to say it closed like minus 300. It was just one way on the offensive line quotes for Baltimore and what came from it. It's been a lot less adamant from Ravens staff so far this offseason. The speculation right now, just looking through quotes, looking through anything that stands out in pressers and how team reporters are covering things, the one thing that stood out to me was how they were looking at defensive line in the draft specifically. So there are a lot of other quotes that are talking about looking at DBs, looking at linebackers as well. Kind of the pass rush in general has become the priority. And so at plus 130 for defensive line or edge rusher, I don't think you can get too excited for that. Cornerback at plus 320 maybe stands out a little bit more as you look at how some of these edge rushers may be going earlier. Ravens are probably going to get to a position at the back end of the first round where they may not have a significantly higher grade on some of these D-line guys versus corners, and they may end up looking at the cornerback position specifically. And so maybe that price comes in a little bit, but there's not enough here to get excited about or bet. But everything this year, in the same way that it was slanted towards the offense last year, has been slanted towards the defense. Cleveland Browns, as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, have had a lot of movement, and so much so that we're now seeing this morning prices off the board for Cleveland on the specifics of what position they're going to draft. But what we are seeing is pick number 2 for Travis Hunter down to minus 130. There was a very misleading quote that went around and was picked up by Underdog and other alert services initially on Abdul Carter and how he was talked about by Adam Schefter on a show. There was a whole chunk where Schefter said in that quote that he had the right to reserve and change his mind in the next upcoming weeks. But only the first part of the actual quote was really picked up by these alert services. And so that really kind of skewed the price on Carter and brought it in a big way, pushed Travis Hunter out. And then over the weekend, there's been a ton of steam about Travis Hunter going number 2. And so we're seeing a lot of the position-specific stuff taken off the board. We're seeing Hunter now down to minus 130, and we're seeing Carter all the way back out to even money for Cleveland. And so that's where it looks. Kevin Stefanski was raving about Carter in the annual meetings, says he doesn't know if there has been a better ball skills receiver, which was kind of a wild quote, because then he immediately backtracked that with saying that he still thinks that we're going to see Hunter play on both sides of the football. So there's a lot of noise about this pick for Cleveland. I don't have any insight specifically. This is going to be a team very much similar to Tennessee, where it is info driven. There's going to be a leak. There's going to be somebody that has something from inside, and we're going to see these odds probably move quite a bit more. When it comes to betting on the draft, this is not where I love to play personally, just because I know that info is going to get out first. It's going to be leaked, and people are going to be betting it very quickly. In that race, there's certainly value to be had. That's just not where I've found a lot of success trying to get that myself. You can hear it, you can tail it, and you can kind of follow up on that steam. But I've been looking at a lot of other teams and these position markets so far. And so that's what's going on with Cleveland. We're seeing those prices come in quite a bit. Cincinnati, team number 3 in the division. This is more of a take that I have on Cincinnati based on listening to a lot of team reporters discuss what's going on, but then also listening to how the inside management of Cincinnati has kind of changed things up. And so I look at Cincinnati very much trying to go defensive line, certainly looking at defense with their first pick, because of the addition of Al Golden as defensive coordinator. So Lou Anarumo was out for Cincinnati. Golden is in, and Golden has been tied throughout his last 5 to 10 years at the position of being a guy who's very good at elevating young talent on the defense. And so there's still uncertainty about how they're going to handle things with the vets on the defensive line, specifically Hendrickson. But I look at the Bengals right now entering this period beginning this year where it's Golden rebuilding youth on the defense. Obviously, the Bengals spent a ton of money on the 2 wide receivers, which they needed to do. And now I think this is the Bengals rebuilding the defense through the draft, giving Golden these pieces to try recapture what this defense was a couple of years ago under Anarumo in a much different scenario with a lot of vets. But to me, this is the Bengals saying, take it, run with it, get your guys, build up the defense. And so for me, defensive line edge rusher certainly stands out and could be a signal of how they handle Hendrickson between now and the start of the season. It is out to minus 150. That's getting a little bit steep, but I do still think the Bengals look at defensive line and edge rusher with their first pick in the draft. The Pittsburgh Steelers are very much a visit-focused team. They very often draft who they visit with. And so if you're trying to get insight on who the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to take with their first pick, keep an eye on the visits upcoming. So far to date, the Pittsburgh Steelers visits with guys that would make sense in the first round have been Dart, Golden, and Emanuwari. And so you think about where these positions fall. It's a quarterback, it's a wide receiver, and it's a defensive back safety. So right now for Pittsburgh, safeties at 18-1. We're seeing defensive line edge at plus 180, but they haven't had a lot of those visits with top guys. Quarterback is at 3-1, and wide receiver is at 17-1. I would probably exclude them from taking a wide receiver number 1 just because they went out and spent so much on Metcalf. And so for me, looking at this, Jackson Dart makes sense for that range. Jackson Dart makes sense for how the Steelers have their depth chart at the moment with number 1 quarterback being Mason Rudolph. Are they going to go into the regular season week 1 with that? It also kind of reminds me of how they treated Kenny Pickett a couple of years ago, picking in a very similar range with him falling down to them. That could be how Dart is potentially viewed as well. And so there hasn't been that top visit with a D lineman edge rusher, which is the highest, plus 180 is the top price in that positional market for Pittsburgh. If you're looking at quarterback at 3-1, just based on the visits so far, that would probably make the most sense. But keep an eye on who they end up visiting with in the next 7 to 8 days. And that could be a pretty good indication of which way the Steelers might be leaning, because over the last several years, there's been a very high correlation between guys that the Steelers visit with and who they end up drafting with their first pick. Moving to the AFC South, starting with the Houston Texans. I would be very surprised if this pick is not used on offense. Right now, the offensive line at minus 250 is the highest price for any team at any position across the entire league. And so that's something that makes a lot of sense, because they move on from Tunzel, and there was like an 8 to 10 day window where the Texans offensive line and their choices were just bashed by anybody with an NFL account online. And so if you went down teams 1 to 32 and you labeled team needs, I would say if you pulled 100 different people and you asked what the need is for Houston, they would all say offensive line. And that need, like strength and percentage wise, would probably be one of the highest conviction needs of any team based on that poll that anybody would have. Here's what I would say just in counter of that is, I don't think I'd want to run and lay minus 250 with a team for a position in this chunk of the draft. But also, if I think back to the conference call, which happened with all of NFL media back in, this was early February at this point, so it's a little bit dated. But there were so many wide receivers that were labeled as a slam dunk pick, specifically by Daniel Jeremiah. And it was talked about prior to the Tunzel departure, like Houston was full on looking at wide receiver, and that was a very easy decision and something that you could look at with a lot of confidence. It's really changed. Does Houston care enough about getting offensive linemen to protect Stroud that they're going to maybe reach a little bit with this pick in an offensive line group that's perhaps not as strong as past years? Or are they going to be able to get a better wide receiver than expected at the spot, with a couple guys having connections to Stroud, a couple guys having connections to Ohio State? Are they going to be able to get that at this point in the first round, which also, by the way, fills a pretty significant need when you think about all Diggs leaving the team. You also have the injury to Tank Dell, which could keep him out for the entire regular season. Are they going to go into week one down so many weapons outside of Nico Collins? Does Christian Kirk exclude them from going out and getting another wide receiver? It probably takes them away from getting a slot guy, but this group of receivers is far weaker going into this year with CJ Stroud than it was last year. And so I don't know if that wide receiver need just goes away because there's so much desperation to get an offensive lineman. We'll see. But this has certainly been a pretty big shift in the odds, and we're seeing O-line at minus 250 when the next highest priced team is minus 150 for a specific position, which we just talked about in Cincinnati. And so pretty big price here on Houston going offensive line. Indianapolis, really think they look offense, whether it's tight end or offensive lineman. Hard to see a lot of other directions for them to go. Lou Anarumo comes in as the defensive coordinator. The defense is going to be better, but they got their guy at defensive back and safety that is going to fit in that scheme. They're loaded with vets in the front seven. I can't see the Colts going defense this high in the draft. Now, tight end has had a lot of hype. Every Shane Steichen presser this offseason has had some sort of focus around him valuing tight ends, him wanting a tight end, how a tight end could feature in his offense. And those have really been picked up, and there's been some steam behind that, so much so that we are seeing tight end priced at even money currently for how the Colts are going to use their first pick. I don't want to throw out the chance that they go offensive line at right guard or right tackle. They lost both of those positions. This is a run-first offense, whether it's Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones, whether it's anybody starting a quarterback beyond that. They're going to run the football with Jonathan Taylor and Shane Steichen. The option game is going to be a big part of this. The right side of the offensive line is certainly a lot weaker than it was last year with those departures. And so I don't think you can discount that. My issue with tight end, if you're looking at even money, I get that it's in mocks everywhere. There's so many quotes. It's so well supported. You have two guys it's a very narrow pool of options. Unlike defensive line, you just don't have this depth of guys where there's multiple options for teams that may have it as a need that's circled. For Indy, you have one of two guys, and one of them at the price that Indy would be paying for with their pick in the middle of the first round would probably be an overplay. If Warren is there, I mean, absolutely, that makes a ton of sense. But you have teams above them that are also tight end needy that could very well be looking at Warren too. Taking Loveland where the Colts are is probably a bit of a reach. And so it's just a very narrow path. One team in the first half of the first round could completely derail this. And so keep that in mind if you're looking at tight end now at even money. You just don't have a lot of wiggle room on how that is going to go. Jacksonville defensive line edge rusher. It's basically been tipped by James Gladstone, the new GM, super young guy. I thought in his first presser, I at least expected a higher level of honesty from him, just given his age, inexperience, getting to the podium. So many people were watching him. To me, in terms of like grading media training and just pose and composure at the podium, to pull off a lot of like smoke screens and kind of hide intentions and things like that, I thought was going to be a little bit difficult for him to do. And so in that first presser, a lot of talk about needing to build the trenches, needing to build the defensive line. I kind of trust that. I think you can buy into that vision quite a bit. Liam Cohen later on in a similar manner, although he has more experience in the NFL at the podium. He said they're definitely looking to add either inside or outside pass rushers in the draft. So there's a lot of ties here to how Jacksonville is favoring going to the defensive line with their first pick in the draft. That is currently at minus 135, which again, you put kind of Jacksonville in that same category as Cincinnati, as Carolina, teams like that who are very heavy towards the defensive line. The negative, I guess, is that the Jags these quotes are so public. Maybe it's a little bit different than looking at Cincinnati, but you start to think about where these prices should be. Ravens last year, with all that conviction, got a lot higher. And so still probably a little bit of wiggle room here at minus 135 if you're buying into Gladstone's comments with the defensive line. Tennessee, obviously tied to the top of the draft with a quarterback. That price currently for Tennessee and the first pick to go to Cam Ward is minus 5,000. Not much that I can add there one way or the other with a price that is that overwhelming. We'll get to the AFC West. Denver, I think you're looking at the Broncos go offense and best player available. A lot of speculation that they're looking at adding a running back. There's been so many quotes from Patton or Peyton about running back for the Broncos. That's now pushing the running back position for the Broncos to plus 150. That is the highest running back price of any team right now, aside from the Las Vegas Raiders, who we'll talk about in a second. This very much looks like the path to that happening would be Hampton going to the Broncos. And so similar to Indianapolis, it's a very narrow window. And it's not like you're dealing with the Raiders who have one of those high picks where it's a narrow path, but there's one guy that makes a lot of sense. And there's just not a lot of teams in front that have that direct connection to him. So you'd probably need a trade. For the Broncos, you kind of need Hampton to be there and Hampton to slide if you're trusting these quotes that the Broncos are going to be looking at a running back. But what I would say that would give me a little bit of hesitation here, if you're thinking about going Broncos and running back, Patton had a quote at meetings last week where he said it's a very deep class, said they are going to get a back this draft, but he also said he wouldn't be surprised to see backs that they like be available in rounds 2 to 6. And so he didn't go out of his way to specify with that first pick that's the way they're looking. Could it be a bit of a attempt to throw everybody off to hope that Hampton would slide to them? Perhaps. But I also think it's a reflection and something we've heard from a lot of other coaches and GMs, that there's a lot of running backs in this class, and them falling back rounds 2, 3, 4 wouldn't be surprising. And that kind of fits where running backs have been going recently. So if it's going to be a back, it probably has to be Hampton here for the Broncos. Very narrow path, pretty high price at plus 150. But just something to keep in mind that there's been references that they may be looking for a back later on in the class as well. Wide receiver is interesting. There's certainly a lot of guys in this range where the Broncos are picking that would be a big value add to Peyton and his offense. And so that's currently the second price at 3-1. But if we get offense, defense splits, typically BetOnline posts those. I would make the offense for the Broncos a very high price for who they're going to draft with their first pick. Kansas City, this is something that I have bet already as well, along with Buffalo, mentioned earlier in the show. I bet Kansas City defensive line or edge rusher at 2-1. Current price is plus 175. I know there's a lot of talk about the need at offensive line and the Chiefs building the offensive line. I just worry late in the first round, there's just not a lot of guys that are slam dunk day one starters necessarily that I think fix the issues that the Chiefs have. What really stood out to me in pressers the last little bit between Andy Reid and Brett Veach, there have been multiple unprovoked responses from both of them about the depth and the talent of edge rusher and pass rusher in this draft. And so often, like I think back to the combine pressers, both of these guys were being asked about running backs and wide receivers, and they would give the reply, but then there was this like comment about defensive line and edge rushers that just popped up and stood out so much. I really liked when there's an unprovoked response, and it was done in a manner by both of these guys where it wasn't just like getting it in or trying to get it in to paint the full picture and just like represent that they're looking at everything. It was just so unusual when they did it that I believe both of them mean it when they say it. And so I like things like that pop up in pressers more so than what do you think about this certain position? And then you get the answer. And that typically gets picked up by a lot of the alert services. This, similar to Buffalo, were just two responses that stood out from coaches and GMs that were unprovoked that I like betting into and I like buying into. So that's the way that I'm looking at Kansas City at plus 175 currently. I would still be looking at playing that. Las Vegas Raiders running back minus 135. This was something that I played as well. This is very similar to me for Cincinnati, where you have the coaching and scheme change coming in. And it's just something that I find hard to believe the team would go a different direction. Pete Carroll at his combine interview in local media availability, he just talks about how much he loves the run game. It's something he's had his entire career, and it's something that I fully buy into, and I believe he wants. I don't believe that the Raiders are in a rebuild mode at all. I think we saw that very clearly from how they handled Geno Smith, how they've handled the offseason. I don't think they can be in a rebuild scenario with Pete Carroll at his age. I think this is a win now and compete now Raiders team. John Spytek, the new GM, he has been talking at pressers about the value of the run game, about how he wants to establish a culture where they're putting on film what it represents to be a Raider, and they want to show the physicality, and they want teams watching 1 or 2 weeks out to really have to say like, wow, this stands out on tape. Every single coach and GM, when asked about Ashton Genty, has talked about how ridiculous the tape is. And so I just have a hard time believing that Pete Carroll and how much he loves the run game, and Spytek and how much he wants to emphasize putting great tape out there and being physical. I just are the Raiders going to go into this season with Raheem Mostert as running back number one? I just don't see it. And so, to me, Genty going to the Raiders, I know it's chalky. I know it's very popular. I know everybody thinks it's going to happen. I just would be surprised if he's there when they're picking, which is very early at 6. Are they really going to pass on him? I think the answer is no. I don't see it. And so, to me, Raiders running back minus 135. It's chalky. It's popular. Everybody sees it. Everybody thinks it's going to happen. I would still be willing to pay that price to see it happen for the Raiders. LA Chargers, weird prices for the Chargers. Defensive line edge rusher plus 150. I know they lost Bosa. I haven't seen a lot or heard a lot or had any sort of evidence put out there that's convincing and compelling that shows that the Chargers are tied to defensive line and edge rush guys in this draft with the first pick. I've seen a lot for wide receiver. I've seen a lot for tight end, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me because they already have Disley. They already have Conklin. And again, like, it's such a narrow window for tight ends. Like, I don't really get that. Loveland going to the Chargers makes a lot more sense than going to the Colts, given where they're drafting. But again, very narrow window. I honestly am surprised to see wide receiver at plus 450 not be priced a lot shorter than it is. I know Williams was added back, and there's speculation that they're trying to maybe get Keenan Allen back. But with kind of this group of wide receivers that are likely to be available between 20 and 30, man, I would have thought the wide receiver price was going to be a lot shorter. Tight ends for a couple teams have become really trendy, and we've seen these prices come in. It really reminds me of last year. And man, I'm surprised to see wide receiver as long as it is for the Chargers at plus 450. So that stood out to me for the Chargers. Of all the teams in the AFC where you're seeing these prices and how they're listed, in general, a lot of these prices that are up there reflect or at least are shaded towards how coaches and GMs and respected reporters are talking about the team and kind of what makes a lot of sense. The Chargers are the one AFC team where I'm looking at it, I'm like, I haven't seen and heard that a lot. And I don't know where that's coming from. And it's like almost a adjustment based on what was lost rather than all these other teams, which are being priced on, like, you can kind of tie it back to something a little bit more concrete. And I don't see that with the Chargers. And so I think there's probably a lot of room for these prices to move and a lot of these prices for change for LA in the next couple of weeks leading up to the draft. And that wide receiver price, I think, could get a little bit shorter between now and this time next week or this time 2 weeks from now for LA. That's just how I'm looking at LA right now at the moment. Want to remind everybody with the free trial at www.oddslogic.com. If you use RAS, you can get a free 7-day trial to try it out. Desktop odds are great. Mobile odds are great as well. Sportsbook availability is fantastic. The speed of the changes, the feeds, the alerts, the injuries, comparable with any other product, 1/5 of the price. Highly recommend everybody check it out. www.oddslogic.com. Use code RAS for a free 7-day trial. And if you've enjoyed the show, footballbetters.com, free email newsletter for everybody to go and sign up. You can keep up with everything going on in the offseason throughout the spring and the summer leading into the new season. Previews, picks, futures, win totals, draft, everything will be covered from myself over at footballbetters.com. So I hope to see everybody who has maybe yet to sign up, get over there and sign up for the free email newsletter. Question from Zach Moss to wrap up. Let's say the Browns go Hunter. They have to have Cousins on board before the draft or have some conviction on a QB they're going to get in the draft. Maybe Sanders falls in round 1 for a trade opportunity. I'll say this, Zach. I think probably more so than any other year, I'm having a lot of difficulty with some of these scenarios at the top. It feels very wide open at the top. It feels like there is a lot of opportunity for things to change between now and the draft. And that's why, as we go through the show, like, I'm calling out Buffalo, I'm calling out Cincinnati, calling out Jacksonville a little bit, calling out Kansas City, calling out Houston a little bit with some of these looks. And as you will hear in the NFC tomorrow, calling out another few teams for prices I like or things that I've already bet that that are kind of off the main focus of the draft, which is kind of at the top with all of these rumors swirling. Because I don't know how this is going to fall at the top. And I don't think a lot of these teams necessarily know either. And I do think there's a lot of room to move. And so in terms of Cousins going to Cleveland, that I would have a lot more better of a comment on. I think that makes a little bit of sense, obviously, given his connection to Stefanski and this offense and this scheme and just stabilizing everything in the organization. What I would perhaps caution a little bit out, I don't know if it necessarily saves anything, because he did not look anywhere near the quarterback that he was last year in the limited time that we saw him playing. And that was in a very favorable condition for him, playing indoors in the dome. There and a lot of skill pieces built around him too last year to work with and take a lot of pressure off him. I know the Browns roster is in still a decent spot, even with the Watson gaff, but I don't know if Cousins solves a lot in Cleveland if he goes there. I don't know what you're getting from him as a quarterback at this point. And the fact that the Falcons were not only willing to address it in the draft, but then address it at a key point in the season and make the shift, that to me was very, very telling. And so you have this organization in Cleveland that just whiffed in a unprecedented fashion on a veteran QB. Are they going to go back and do it again with a guy that just didn't show it on tape, again, coming off of an injury as a bit of an unknown, and risk repeating that? I don't know. Everything that I've heard about Sanders from scouts on podcasts and from guys who are looking at him feel like he's a much better fit indoors in a place like New Orleans, or they were speculating early Las Vegas, obviously before Geno. There was always kind of concerns about him playing in a place like Cleveland. And so I don't know if that's necessarily an option early on. Again, I don't know. Not a lot of conviction nor insight nor confidence for me whatsoever with some of these top guys and how it's going to fall. But man, I would say there's even less so knowing what you're going to get from Cousins going in. So that's what I would look at. Sounds like you agree. Very true. I'm there with you about Cousins. I just don't know what a better option is, unfortunately. Great show. Something I would throw out to end. What happened to Ryan Tannehill? Where did he go? Where is he now? It's like he fell off the face of the earth and is no longer in any of these discussions. I would probably take a chance on him before I would take a chance on Cousins. But then again, like, I don't even know where he is. It's just like he doesn't exist anymore. But I would rather take a chance if I'm in that position. I'd rather take a chance on him than I would Cousins, certainly. But I don't know where I don't know where he went. It's like he disappeared. It's weird. That's all I can say about that. So, okay. Thanks everybody for stopping by. Tomorrow, same time, NFC team by team update. We'll go through each of the teams. Wednesday, Thursday, positional over-under reactions as we have some of those odds hitting the board. We'll talk about movement. Friday, position totals for the first round. We'll tally everything up. We'll go through a few mocks. We'll aggregate a lot of sources, and we'll go through it. Be sure to check out oddslogic.com as well as footballbetters.com if you have any time to do so here following the show. Thanks for stopping by. We'll chat to each and every one of you again, same time tomorrow.